On May 16th, Ryan and Claire Goodwin vanished without a trace from their suite on the 7th floor of the prestigious Ocean View Hotel in Miami Beach. 48 hours later, while investigators were still combing through their room for clues, Anthony Miller, the hotel's concierge for 12 years, walked unannounced into the Miami Beach Police Department. The words he spoke froze the blood of the detectives on duty. "I know what happened to them. They died because of what they discovered." This confession upended the entire investigation and revealed a secret so dark it shook the very foundations of Miami's glamorous facade. But how could a couple on a romantic getaway trigger such dramatic events? And above all, what terrifying truth had Anthony Miller kept buried during those agonizing 48 hours? Miami Beach. This jewel of the Atlantic coast beats to the frantic rhythm of its annual film festival. Every May, the city glitters under the spotlights of the world stage, drawing celebrities, producers, and the wealthy elite from every corner of the globe. Ocean Drive echoes with the sharp click of high heels on red carpets, while the terraces of rooftop bars overflow with animated conversations in a dozen languages. Beneath this electric atmosphere, however, lies a less dazzling reality. Behind the glittering surface, Miami becomes each year a playground for the darkest of dealings. The Ocean View Hotel, a monument of luxury facing the Atlantic since 1929, embodies that duality. Its Art Deco suites host the most influential figures of Hollywood. Its 120 employees, directed with an iron hand, maintain absolute discretion about their wealthy clientele. This golden silence preserves the Ocean View's reputation for excellence, but also allows certain abuses to flourish unchecked. Ryan Goodwin, a 45-year-old architect specializing in historic restoration, had built his reputation on bringing America's most prestigious landmarks back to life. A graduate of Columbia University's architecture school, his devouring passion for art pushed him to collect paintings, sculptures, and rare objects. His trained eye, sharpened by 2 decades of experience, spotted fakes and suspicious restorations instantly. Auction houses from New York to Los Angeles regularly sought his expertise. Claire Goodwin, his wife of 15 years, shared his pursuit of excellence. At 41, she had risen through the ranks of the fine dining world to earn the coveted title of Best Sommelier in America in 2012. That honor opened the doors of the most exclusive restaurants in the country. Their story had begun in the wine cellar of a Michelin-starred restaurant where Claire was head sommelier. Ryan had been called to appraise a collection of rare bottles. He was captivated by her encyclopedic knowledge and contagious passion. Bonded by their shared love of art, wine, and culture, they became inseparable. With no children, their weekends were dedicated to exploring historic estates, art museums, and vineyards across the country. For them, the Miami Film Festival was the perfect chance to mix pleasure and professional opportunity. Claire reconnected with her contacts in luxury hospitality, while Ryan frequented the exclusive gallery exhibitions organized alongside the screenings. In May 2015, they booked their usual suite at the Ocean View for a 4-day stay. May 15th through 19th, at the heart of the festivities. On Friday, May 15th, they arrived at the hotel around 2 p.m. after a flight from New York. The staff welcomed them with customary deference reserved for regular patrons. Anthony Miller, the seasoned concierge with a warm smile and polished manners, personally escorted them to their suite on the 7th floor overlooking the ocean. Anthony, in his late 30s and originally from Orlando, had worked at the Ocean View since 2003. A former hospitality student, he quickly rose through the ranks thanks to his perfect knowledge of international guests and his uncanny ability to anticipate their needs. Discreet but effective, he enjoyed the absolute trust of both management and loyal clientele. Yet his personal finances were far less glamorous. His modest salary barely covered the costly treatments for his ailing mother in a private clinic in Coral Gables. That Friday afternoon, the Ocean View buzzed with feverish activity. The corridors echoed with preparations for the festival's opening gala, while celebrities and film industry moguls streamed into the hotel. In this whirl of excitement, no one paid much attention to the discreet presence of Viktor Lazarev, a 58-year-old Russian businessman occupying the presidential suite on the 8th floor. Lazarev personified the new wave of oligarch wealth that surged after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Officially, he owned a chain of supermarkets in Siberia. In reality, his fortune, hundreds of millions of dollars was built on raw material trafficking and corruption. Every year he used Miami's film festival as a cover to launder illicit revenues by purchasing high-value art. On Saturday, May 16th at 7 p.m., the Ocean View hosted an exclusive wine tasting in a private salon. Reserved for its wealthiest guests, about 15 people gathered around bottles of rare vintages poured by Claire Goodwin herself, invited as an expert for the evening. Ryan accompanied her, taking the opportunity to study the artworks decorating the hotel's salons. During the tasting, Ryan noticed a set of paintings displayed in a side alcove. The works, advertised as part of a private collection for a charity auction the next day, immediately drew his trained eye. He approached a supposed Monet and frowned. The signature was irregular, the brushwork inconsistent with the master's authentic style. He discreetly examined the others, a Renoir, a Picasso from the Blue Period, a Cézanne. All bore troubling inconsistencies. To him the verdict was clear. They were sophisticated forgeries. What disturbed him most was that each came with certificates of authenticity from reputable New York auction houses. Meanwhile, Claire animated the evening with her usual expertise, guiding guests through a journey of flavors. She noticed Lazarev's presence. He listened intently, asking pointed, technical questions about rare Burgundy vintages, knowledge that surprised her, given his otherwise blunt demeanor. By 10 p.m., as the evening ended, Ryan shared his suspicions with Claire in the privacy of their suite. She, in turn, recounted her unease about Lazarev's precise knowledge and the snippets of conversation she had overheard in Russian references to art investments, discreet transfers, and a strange insistence on how rare wines were transported overseas. Together, they formed a disturbing theory. What if this so-called charity auction was actually a front for laundering fake art to unscrupulous collectors? That night, sleep eluded them. Ryan replayed the technical flaws in the paintings, while Claire recalled Lazarev's cryptic exchanges. At dawn on Sunday, May 17th, Ryan made a decision that would seal their tragic fate. At 6 a.m., he slipped quietly back into the private salon, determined to examine the paintings again in daylight. Equipped with his magnifying glass and camera, he documented every detail. The photographs revealed damning evidence: artificially aged varnish, anachronistic pigments, sloppy brushstrokes. He now held irrefutable proof of the deception. Unfortunately for him, Ryan's early morning inspection didn't escape the sharp eye of Anthony Miller, who was making his usual rounds in the hotel's common areas. Alarmed to see a guest photographing the paintings on display, the concierge immediately alerted Viktor Lazarev. The Russian businessman instantly grasped the danger this discovery posed to his criminal operation. With a few phone calls, he activated a network of associates determined to protect their secret at any cost. Around 7 o'clock, Ryan returned to his suite, unaware of the storm he had just unleashed. He showed Claire the photographs, and she confirmed his suspicions. Together, they decided they would contact the authorities after breakfast to report the elaborate art fraud. This decision, made in complete innocence, would seal their fate. At precisely 8 o'clock that Sunday morning, Maria Santos, a housekeeper originally from Portugal who had worked at the Ocean View for 8 years, knocked on their door for the routine morning service. When no one answered, she used her passkey to enter. The suite was empty. The bed hadn't been slept in. The couple's belongings were neatly packed in their suitcases. There were no signs of a struggle. Only one troubling anomaly stood out. Their electronic devices, including phones, laptop, and camera, had vanished. Maria, who knew the habits of wealthy guests inside and out, was deeply unsettled. She remembered seeing the Goodwins in the hallway just the night before, around 11 p.m. Concerned, she immediately notified Anthony Miller, who rushed upstairs to inspect the room himself. He carefully noted the details. Claire's evening gown still hung in the closet. Her jewelry rested in its case on the vanity, and Ryan's wallet contained several $100s in cash along with his credit cards. This effectively ruled out both a voluntary departure and an ordinary robbery. Faced with this inexplicable situation, Anthony alerted hotel management, who in turn contacted the Miami Beach Police Department. By 11 a.m., Detective Marissa Delacroix, a seasoned 42-year-old investigator with 15 years of experience in major crimes, arrived with her forensic team. Each year, the Miami Film Festival brought its share of theft, scams, and blackmail. But unexplained disappearances in a luxury hotel were exceedingly rare. The initial examination of the suite revealed troubling details. First, no footprints led toward the balcony, excluding the possibility of an accident from the 7th floor. Second, surveillance cameras clearly showed the couple returning to their room at 11:15 p.m. on Saturday night, but there was no footage of them ever leaving. Third, the selective disappearance of only their electronics suggested a deliberate attempt to erase specific evidence. The questioning of hotel staff began immediately. Anthony Miller, as the concierge who had last seen the couple, was interviewed first. Cooperative but noticeably nervous, he stated that he had escorted them upon arrival and had seen them briefly after the wine tasting on Saturday evening as they headed toward the elevators. When Detective Delacroix asked if the couple had interacted with other guests, Anthony mentioned their presence at the tasting but failed to disclose Ryan's early morning investigation of the paintings. Meanwhile, Lazarev was contacted in his presidential suite. He displayed a facade of cooperation, tinged with annoyance. He admitted attending the wine tasting but claimed he had no particular interaction with the Goodwins. His alibi for Saturday night seemed solid. He insisted he had spent the evening with 2 Russian associates in his suite before leaving for a private Miami nightclub around midnight. Surveillance footage confirmed his exit from the hotel at that hour with 2 men matching the description. The search intensified rapidly. Authorities deployed rescue divers to comb the marina, fearing a possible maritime accident. Forensic teams scoured the suite for biological traces of an assault. Investigators contacted airlines, rental car agencies, and train operators to verify whether the couple had left the region. Simultaneously, Detective Delacroix delved into their backgrounds. She uncovered an impeccable professional reputation, no criminal record, and solid finances that ruled out debt or voluntary disappearance. Calls to their friends and family confirmed that no personal or professional issues had suggested they might run away. By Monday, May 18th, the media had seized on the case. The disappearance of a cultured New York couple in a luxury Miami Beach hotel during the film festival instantly drew national headlines. Reporters swarmed the Ocean View, forcing management to hold a press conference to curb speculation. The publicity complicated the investigation, piling public pressure onto detectives and fueling wild theories across social media. Anthony Miller spent those 72 hours in mounting dread. The weight of what he knew gnawed at him, but fear of retaliation silenced him. He watched the investigation intensify with a mix of guilt and terror, knowing that with each passing hour it became harder to hide his role. His colleagues noticed his odd behavior, excessive nervousness, trembling hands, difficulty concentrating, but assumed it was stress from the crisis. At 6 a.m. on Tuesday, May 19th, exactly 72 hours after the disappearance, an unexpected discovery shifted the investigation dramatically. Workers cleaning the Miami marina found fragments of electronic devices in a dumpster near the docks. The charred, smashed remains matched the models of the Goodwins' phones and camera. Forensic analysis confirmed the devices had been deliberately destroyed to prevent recovery of data. Still, technicians managed to salvage damaged fragments of memory cards, which were rushed to the State Forensic Lab in Tallahassee for deeper analysis. That same morning, Detective Delacroix received a call that would change everything. Anthony Miller, consumed by guilt and terror, asked to meet her immediately. His trembling voice betrayed extreme psychological distress. He set an appointment at police headquarters for 1 p.m., insisting he had a critical declaration to make about the Goodwins' disappearance. At the appointed hour, Anthony entered her office, pale, shaking, his words hesitant. Before she even asked a question, he whispered the sentence that flipped the case on its head. "I know what happened to them. They died because of what they discovered." Shocked, Detective Delacroix activated the recording system and summoned a clerk to formalize the procedure. Fully aware of the gravity of his words, Anthony requested the presence of an attorney before continuing. Within the hour, criminal defense lawyer Catherine Russell arrived at headquarters. With counsel present, Anthony began to unravel his indirect role in the couple's fate. He admitted alerting Lazarev after catching Ryan secretly photographing the paintings in the private salon. What he had thought was a routine professional gesture spiraled into a chain of tragic events he had never anticipated. Anthony then revealed the existence of a tacit arrangement between hotel management and certain wealthy guests with questionable activities. In exchange for substantial tips, the Ocean View turned a blind eye to whatever transpired behind its walls. He confessed that he himself had accepted thousands of dollars in hush money from Lazarev over the years in return for his silence and cooperation. The revelations shattered the image of the model employee. Anthony Miller was no mere bystander. He had become an active accomplice in criminal activity. His precarious finances, worsened by the crushing cost of his mother's medical treatments, had slowly pulled him into compromises that eventually trapped him in a criminal spiral far beyond his control. Detective Marissa Delacroix grasped the implications at once. If Anthony Miller was telling the truth, the Ocean View was being used as cover for an international money laundering operation. A simple missing persons case had just become an organized crime investigation requiring specialized federal involvement. Pressed for details, Anthony slowly mapped out the criminal machine orchestrated by Viktor Lazarev. The Russian businessman leveraged the prestige of the Miami Film Festival to stage private sales of artworks presented as authentic but secretly fabricated in clandestine studios in Eastern Europe. These transactions laundered proceeds from criminal enterprises by converting dirty money into seemingly legitimate art investments. The scheme was remarkably sophisticated. Each fake came with forged but technically flawless certificates of authenticity, issued by accomplices embedded within reputable auction houses. The buyers, often entangled in illicit activities themselves, accepted the ruse because it offered an efficient way to legitimize hidden income. According to Anthony, Lazarev had been running these sales for 5 years, exploiting the festival's frenzy to attract a wealthy international clientele. Each operation generated millions, recycling vast sums from narcotics trafficking, corruption, and other criminal ventures across Russia and Eastern Europe. Ryan Goodwin's discovery threatened to bring the whole edifice down. His photographs were irrefutable, and his reputation meant authorities would listen. Lazarev could not risk exposure that would collapse his network and trigger multi-country investigations. Under Delacroix's steady questioning, Anthony disclosed even darker details. Lazarev didn't act alone. He commanded an international web with collaborators in multiple European capitals. In Paris, a corrupt art expert named Henry Valmont authenticated the forgeries in exchange for large payments. A disgraced former museum curator, Valmont had been quietly serving the organization for 3 years. Delacroix took meticulous notes as Anthony outlined the workflow. Paintings fabricated in a covert workshop in Prague by master forgers capable of replicating old master techniques. A stopover in Geneva, where banking insiders facilitated the financial movements. And finally Miami, where Lazarev staged private charity events to move the pieces. This explained why the paperwork had looked so convincing to Ryan. Valmont exploited old museum contacts to get documents validated by non-complicit experts who had no idea they were bolstering a fraud. That psychological sleight of hand fooled even seasoned collectors. The authentications appeared to come from impeccable sources. Anthony went on, describing the climate of fear surrounding Lazarev's circle. People who tried to leave or talk had a way of vanishing. A Milan gallerist who refused to cooperate turned up dead at home, officially a heart attack, under suspicious circumstances. A banker, too curious for his own good, died in a car crash no one could quite explain. Those intimidation tactics fueled the terror eating at Anthony since the Goodwins disappeared. He knew his confession put him in mortal danger, but the guilt had grown unbearable. Watching search teams scour Miami's waters for bodies that weren't there shredded him. He couldn't bear seeing Ryan's and Claire's parents, who had flown down Monday morning, pleading through tears on camera for information. Delacroix recognized the case's magnitude. She alerted the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office and requested immediate support from a federal organized crime task force, FBI, and Homeland Security investigations, given the operation's international reach. It was an unusual escalation for a local disappearance, but the network's tentacles demanded it. Meanwhile, inside his penthouse at the Ocean View, Viktor Lazarev started to worry about Anthony's prolonged silence. The concierge was supposed to provide regular updates on the police inquiry. By late morning, the lack of contact set off alarms. Lazarev was already contemplating a hasty exit from Miami. Anthony's revelations also clarified how the Goodwins had been eliminated. According to him, in the dead of night between Saturday and Sunday, Lazarev called in 2 specialists, former soldiers turned organized crime contractors. They drove into Miami under cover of darkness and entered the hotel through service corridors Anthony had identified for them. He admitted providing a master keycard that opened the Goodwin suite around 3 a.m. The killers surprised the couple in their sleep, silenced them, and disposed of the bodies using a method Lazarev had employed before, dissolving remains in concentrated acid, leaving no physical trace for investigators. That chilling detail explained the pristine room. No signs of struggle, no cries for help. Personal effects were left in place to suggest a voluntary disappearance, while the electronics were destroyed to erase photographic evidence. Anthony specified the window, between 3 and 5 a.m., during his overnight shift. He personally escorted the men to the suite and later helped move the bodies down service stairs without attracting attention. That direct complicity worsened his legal exposure, but he seemed resigned to the consequences. When Delacroix pressed him on the location, Anthony disclosed that Lazarev maintained a secluded property west of the city, in the Redland area near the edge of the Everglades, a rented villa outfitted with a clandestine lab designed for exactly this purpose. Officially, it was leased for the duration of the festival. In reality, it was the organization's rear base for criminal operations. The tension in Delacroix's office thickened with each disclosure. Exhausted by the weight of his secrets, Anthony looked almost relieved to finally speak, despite what it meant for him. His attorney, Catherine Russell, fully grasped the extraordinary gravity of the case and the risks her client now faced by cooperating. The interrogation stretched into late afternoon, each answer adding new threads. Other Ocean View employees were compromised, including the head of security, who ignored suspicious comings and goings in exchange for cash. That pervasive corruption explained how a criminal network had operated so long in such a prestigious hotel without scrutiny. In the 48 hours since the disappearance surfaced, authorities finally had a coherent account of what befell Ryan and Claire Goodwin. Now it was a race to arrest the perpetrators and dismantle the enterprise before it could claim more victims. At exactly 6 p.m. on Tuesday, May 19th, Delacroix coordinated a multi-agency takedown with FBI SWAT, CSI, and Miami-Dade Police. 3 teams deployed simultaneously, one to the Ocean View to arrest Lazarev, a second to the Redland Villa to secure physical evidence, and a third to Miami International Airport to block any escape. The Ocean View operation unfolded with maximum discretion to avoid tipping off the press or jeopardizing the case. Guided by Anthony Miller, who cooperated fully despite being in custody, the tactical team used service corridors to reach the presidential suite. They found Lazarev in the midst of an apparent hurried departure. He offered no physical resistance but flatly refused to answer questions. At the same time, the team headed west located the rented compound exactly as Anthony had described. The property's basement concealed a clandestine lab fitted with stainless steel vats and sophisticated ventilation. The acrid stench left little doubt about its purpose. Subsequent chemical tests would reveal traces consistent with hydrofluoric acids, agents brutally effective at dissolving organic matter without leaving identifiable remains. A search of the upstairs office uncovered further damning evidence of the ring's activity. Multiple forged artworks in progress, accompanied by falsified certificates of authenticity. The forged documents seized at the Redland Villa were astonishingly sophisticated, bearing the falsified signatures of respected American art experts and the seals of prestigious auction houses. More disturbing still, a hidden safe behind a painting contained detailed files on dozens of figures in the art world. These dossiers held compromising information gathered through blackmail or corruption, explaining how Victor Lazarev maintained the silence of unwilling accomplices. One file revealed that Dr. Henry Valmont, the disgraced former curator, had been kept in line by threats to expose his past embezzlement. Lazarev's seized laptop proved even more damning. After hours of decryption by forensic specialists, investigators uncovered the true scope of his empire. Encrypted correspondence showed regular contact with parallel networks in Switzerland, Italy, and Germany, suggesting a genuine international mafia built around art laundering. Bank records confirmed the scale. More than 55 million washed through art transactions in just 5 years, all tied to narcotics from Afghanistan, corruption of former Soviet officials, and embezzled Russian state funds. The art market, with its lack of traditional banking oversight, had been the perfect laundering vehicle. Interrogated with his attorney and an interpreter, Lazarev invoked total denial. Hardened by his past in Soviet intelligence, he stonewalled every accusation, claiming he'd been set up by associates who had used his rental property without his knowledge. Detective Delacroix was unsurprised. She knew he was gambling on his lawyers to create just enough legal doubt. But the mountain of evidence, paired with Anthony Miller's testimony, made that strategy thin at best. Anthony's cooperation reached its most chilling point when he agreed to show detectives the exact vat in the villa's basement where Ryan and Claire Goodwin had been dissolved. His description led investigators to focus their sampling there. Forensic analysis uncovered microscopic human DNA fragments that had resisted the acid. Cross-referenced with material from the couple's hotel suite, the results were conclusive. The missing persons case became a confirmed double homicide. The arrest of Viktor Lazarev and the dismantling of his network marked the close of an investigation that had lasted just 72 hours. That unprecedented speed was only possible because Miller, racked by guilt, chose to confess rather than let the Goodwins' families linger in torment. His complicity couldn't be erased, but his testimony cracked open the case. What followed was a sweeping international takedown. In New York, Dr. Henry Valmont was arrested at his townhouse and quickly confessed, citing years of blackmail. In Prague, Czech police raided the forger's workshop, arresting more than a dozen. In Switzerland, private bankers faced charges of aggravated money laundering. The scandal exposed deep vulnerabilities, how organized crime had infiltrated cultural institutions once considered untouchable. Miami's festival, like Cannes before it, had been exploited as a glamorous stage for a vast laundering machine. For Miller, the confession meant prison. He received 15 years but expressed remorse at trial and testified against Lazarev, earning a measure of leniency from the jury. His cooperation secured Lazarev's fate, life imprisonment with no chance of parole for 22 years. The Goodwins' families, though devastated, found a measure of peace in knowing the truth. Supported by victim advocacy groups, they launched a foundation dedicated to fighting art trafficking, preserving Ryan's and Claire's memory by targeting the very crime that destroyed them. The Ocean View Hotel, scarred by scandal, overhauled its security staff and instituted strict client vetting procedures. Painful as it was, the reset gradually restored its standing with elite international guests. Detective Delacroix received commendations for her leadership, though privately she carried bitter memories of how innocence had been crushed under organized crime's machinery. Quick resolution couldn't hide the brutal reality. Too ordinary. People had been sacrificed to protect sordid interests. The case also marked a turning point in the fight against art laundering. U.S. authorities rolled out strict oversight of high-value art transactions and created a specialized unit for detecting forged certificates. These measures, modeled directly on Lazarev's methods, stopped several laundering attempts in the months that followed. International raids revealed the network's true scale, an empire operating for over a decade, moving more than $350 million annually. In Moscow, Russian authorities, pushed by diplomatic pressure, finally admitted Lazarev had long been on a watch list for tax evasion and corruption. Farther afield, in Buenos Aires, police discovered a warehouse stacked with forged works bound for the North American market. The Miami ring turned out to be just one branch of a vast criminal hydra. Confronted with the evidence, Valmont explained how Lazarev had recruited him, not just with money but through targeted blackmail. A covert audit had uncovered his museum thefts, and Lazarev had used that leverage to secure his obedience. It was a pattern repeated across the network: identify a weakness, exploit it, and bind the person through fear of exposure. The seized files confirmed this strategy in chilling detail, cataloging hundreds of art experts, complete with their habits, finances, and vulnerabilities. It was a machine built not only on corruption but on psychological control, designed to ensure absolute loyalty. The trial of Viktor Lazarev, held in Miami federal court months after his arrest, captivated the public's imagination across the United States. Day after day, the hearings peeled back the layers of his criminal empire, exposing crimes that extended far beyond the double homicide of Ryan and Claire Goodwin. The most haunting moment came with the testimony of Anthony Miller. Now a protected witness after repeated death threats in prison, he stood before the jury and described in chilling detail the night of the murders. He recounted how he had guided the two hitmen to Suite 712, how he waited in the hallway as they carried out their grim work, and how he helped them quietly remove the bodies through the service stairs. His sobs punctuated the account, revealing a man consumed by remorse who had finally broken under the weight of his guilt. Lazarev's attorney tried to discredit Miller, pointing to his initial contradictions and suggesting he was cooperating only to reduce his own sentence. But the strategy failed. Every shred of physical evidence, the DNA traces found in the clandestine lab, the phone records linking the conspirators, the corroborating testimonies of accomplices arrested abroad, converged squarely on Lazarev's guilt. Equally powerful were the voices of the Goodwin's families. Jack Goodwin, Ryan's father and a retired literature professor, spoke with dignified sorrow about the impact of the tragedy. He described his son's passion for art, his uncompromising integrity, and the deep love he shared with Claire through 15 years of marriage. Margaret Durant, Claire's mother and a former elementary school principal, testified to her daughter's radiant personality, an accomplished woman who dreamed of traveling with her husband through vineyards around the world. Their words reminded everyone in the courtroom that behind the intricate criminal plot were 2 human lives crushed by greed and violence. A court-appointed psychiatrist painted Lazarev as a classic psychopath, intelligent, charismatic on the surface but devoid of empathy. He displayed all the hallmarks of high-level international criminals: shallow charm, absence of remorse, masterful manipulation, and a purely utilitarian view of human relationships. It explained how he could order the cold-blooded elimination of the Goodwins without the faintest hesitation. 3 years later, the case continued to shape reform. Congress passed new legislation targeting art market laundering, requiring mandatory reporting for transactions over $150,000 and creating a national registry for certificates of authenticity. Nicknamed the Goodwin Act, the law honored the victims by tightening oversight of the art world. The Goodwin Foundation, established by their families, quickly became a leader in the fight against art crime, funding research on forgery detection, training authenticators, and raising public awareness. The foundation protected countless private collections from criminal infiltration and helped prevent further tragedies. The Ocean View Hotel, after weathering its reputational storm, implemented strict security and client screening procedures that became an industry benchmark. It began working closely with federal agencies to flag high-risk clientele and refuse to host individuals suspected of criminal activity. Slowly, trust among its elite guests was restored. Anthony Miller, released after serving 10 years thanks to his cooperation, tried to rebuild his life under a new identity in a quiet Midwestern town. Working as a municipal employee, he devoted his spare time to volunteer work with victim support groups. His redemption was partial at best. Nothing could erase his role, but it showed that sincere repentance was possible even after grave crimes. Detective Marissa Delacroix, promoted to special agent in charge at a regional FBI organized crime unit, drew on her experience from the Goodwin case to dismantle other international networks and mentor younger investigators. Still, she carried bitter memories. The case had taught her a cruel lesson. Truth often comes too late to save innocent lives. Anthony's confession, exactly 48 hours after the couple vanished, had been the turning point. Without it, the fate of Ryan and Claire might have remained forever hidden, leaving their families in endless torment. This precise timing underscored the critical importance of testimony in solving even the most complex cases. The Goodwin tragedy revealed how greed and organized crime could transform places of prestige into theaters of horror. It exposed how ordinary citizens remained vulnerable to the long reach of international syndicates willing to kill anyone who threatened their profits. And it left lingering questions. Had the warning signs been visible all along? How could a romantic weekend have spiraled so brutally into tragedy?